Salam Youtube. It is I, Suleiman the Magnificent, and welcome to my first video on my YouTube channel. Talking to you straight from the Jannah, I am here to share with you the story of the grandiose Ottoman Empire. As previous Sultan myself, I have learned and discovered much about my nation's history and legacy during these 46 years and participated greatly in its expansion. To start talking about the expansion of our great Ottoman Empire, we can go back further into history and start by saying that the Ottoman Empire is not remembered as legendary for no reason. Its reign lasted up to 700 years and was built on a strong army that conquered territories and ruled over new lands with a firm grip. I was taught that my ancestors were nomads, warriors, called Ghazi, who battled opposing empires such as the Mongols and the Byzantine state. It was a weakening Christian power, which was seeing an increase in religion, opposition, and decreasing economy. My late ancestor, Osman, led his army to rule over the Byzantine Empire and later southeastern Europe. Aided with his son Osman, he took over western Anatolia and became the founder of the empire, to which he gave his name, the Ottoman Turkish state. He continued his conquests until his presumed death in 1324. His son and successor Orhan obtained the city of Bursa only 2 years later in 1326. Orhan reigned from his father's death in 1326 up until his own passing in 1360, when his son Murad I took on the role of emperor. He also led an extensive conquest into the north in the region of Thrace, up until Adrianople in the Byzantine Empire. He established it as a new capital, renaming it Edim after 1 year in power. He continued his father and grandfather's expansions further into European territories, truly implementing the Ottoman Empire as an ever-growing Turkish power, whose conquered territories kept their culture and suzerainty as long as they paid taxes and provided soldiers when in need. This ruling made the Ottoman expansion different from our European counterparts, as we sought to avoid resistance and allowed citizens to keep their nationality, religion, and culture peacefully. This policy permitted the ruler to manage its rapidly growing empire without creating a conflict and overly complex administration, as well as for Murad I until the Battle of Kosovo. My ancestor wanted to conquer Kosovo as it was strategically positioned within trade routes, and as well as providing the army a better entry into the land of Lazar, a territory Murad I wanted to possess. Kosovo was ruled by majority Christian Serbs, and the rising tensions between both religious powers were at their peak, leading to a violent battle on Serbian ground where Murad I met his fate. It was not quite revealed how he died. His son Bayezid, who fought by his side, never truly wanted to share the story as it was bitter memory. But from what I have learned and read, he was assassinated in his camp by a Serbian spy pretending to be a deserter, leading Bayezid to retreat the army back to Turkey so he could take on the role of the Ottoman Empire in the capital. Now let's go right into how we became the best civilization on earth. Just kidding, haha. Okay, so after a long or somewhat easy expansion of our empire, we started to see the first signs of internal division within the royal family, known as interregnum. Boom, boom, boom. During this period, 4 of Bayezid's sons competed for the right to rule the entire empire. His eldest son Suleiman managed to gain control in Europe from the Christian vassals and those who had been able to turn Bayezid towards conquests in the east. The second brother, Mehmed, on the other hand, grew support through the descendants of the Turkmen notables who helped him in the early Ottoman conquests in Europe. He had further support from the Anatolian Muslim religious orders who helped him kill his brothers Musa Bey, who had his armies at Bursa, and Isa Bey of Balikazir as well as Suleiman. And so, victorious in his battles, Mehmed assumed the undisputed possession of the entire empire as Sultan Mehmed I. Finally, after all the brothers tried killing each other, we had a little peace in the royal family for about 5 minutes. Under Mehmed I and Murad II, there was new period of expansion in which Bayezid's empire was restored and new territories were added. Mehmed restored the vassal system, while Murad II devoted most of his early years of his reign to internal problems, especially towards the Ghazi commander. As time progressed, the new Sultan Mehmed II took hold and the division came to dominate and take advantage of the European weakness created in Varna. Mehmed II built the Rumeili fortress on the European side of the Bosphorus, with which he conducted a siege and conquest of Constantinople. Now here, boys and girls, was a turning movement in history when that city was transformed into the Ottoman capital known as Istanbul. It meant the end of the older power of Turkish nobility whose leaders were executed or exiled to Anatolia. Yikes. Externally, the conquest made Mehmed the most famous ruler in the Muslim world, other than me of course. And now we get to the peak of my empire, the Ottoman Empire. Bayezid was my grandfather, and his reign was right after his father, Mehmed II, which lasted from 1481 up until 1512, and was largely a period of rest. Bayezid was a man who preferred to maintain peace, to leave time for development, but was unfortunately forced into campaigns because of his more militant divers and followers, leading to the control of major entrepot of the northern European trade with the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. The Ottoman desire to share control with the Muslim holy cities of Mecca and Medina led to an intermittent war from 1485 to up until 1491, which was inconclusive. Bayezid then later turned to Venice, one of his major European enemies, in which they have been encouraging revolts against the Sultan. Venice gained control of Cyprus in 1489 and built a major naval base in which they refused Bayezid to use against the Mamluks. Bayezid was able to conquer the Venetian ports in Morea, and the Ottoman fleet emerged as a major Mediterranean naval power for the first time. Ismail, the leader of the Safavid community, spread his message as Sufi leader in Anatolia, leading to a major revolt of his followers against the Ottomans in 1511. Due to Bayezid's more delicate and mystic nature, the Janissaries dethroned him in favor of his militant son Selim. Moving on to Selim I. Selim ruled from 1512 up until 1520. He was my father. He had a very aggressive mentality, unlike Bayezid, and even killed all his brothers and sons, except me, in order not to be controlled by anyone in any way. The new Sultan decided to choose the Safavid of Iran as his initial victims and launched a vigorous campaign against the Safavid supporters in eastern Anatolia, killing thousands. In 1514, he undertook a major expedition against the Safavids, hoping to add Iran to his territory. This conquest resulted in the failure to do so, because of Safavid interception in Azerbaijan and the lack of booty and supplies for the Ottomans. Before 1515 and 1517, he decided to establish his strategic position against the Mamluk Empire in eastern Anatolia, which led to a year-long campaign from 1516 to 1517. He succeeded in doing so with the help of Mamluk officials who had betrayed their masters in return for revenue and important positions promised by the conquerors. The Ottomans replaced the Mamluks in control of the Middle East portion of the old trade routes between Europe and East Asia, and the Middle Eastern society was restored under the guidance of the powerful imperial orders. However, the Islamic world was left permanently divided, with Iran and Transoxania, which were once centers of the Islamic caliphates, separated from the Arab world. Now comes the greatest period of the Ottoman Empire, which is the period of the magnificent Sultan, and it is I, the great Sultan Suleiman. I must say that I was lucky when I started off due to the wealth and power I was left with, which was incomparable to any sultan before me. During the beginning of my period, I formed a great alliance with France, in which they used me to take advantage of the Ottoman pressure to decrease Habsburg pressure from the east. In 1521, I was able to overtake Belgrade due to the upstrings that were stimulated by the Reformation and the split of the Hungarian nobles, which made them very vulnerable. The other period of the Habsburg-Ottoman relations, around 1526 to 1541, was focused on the Hungarian king János, who weirdly accepted my rules in exchange for the right to continue his military administration. However, Prince Ferdinand, who ruled the northern parts of Hungary, was against the Turks. He later occupied the rest of Hungary by 1528. I responded by returning from Anatolia in an attempt to drive the Habsburgs from Hungary to besiege Vienna, but I failed to do so due to the difficulties in supplying such a large army. By 1533, Ferdinand abandoned his claims to central Hungary and left John responsible, while I agreed to accept Ferdinand as a ruler for an exchange of a monetary sum. But when John died, he left his dominions to Ferdinand and had defied me. And then when Ferdinand tried to assume heritage by force, I claimed my power and occupied Hungary
in 1541
for the first time. During this period, we had a great relationship with France. We signed a capitulation treaty of 1536, an agreement in which the French were given freedom to roam my dominions or lands. I used this to serve as a model for the future relationships with other Europeans. This was between myself and King Francis. Later on, the organized military conflict got shifted to the sea, in which we were a major naval power. At the time, my main enemy was the Genoese naval commander Andrea Doria, in which we battled in the Mediterranean. During these times, we battled with the Knights of Rhodes. I appointed Khaireddin as a Grand Admiral. He was a Turkish captain who helped me build major pirate fleets in order to capture Algiers and the North African ports. I attempted to attack southern Italy with the aid of France, in which Admiral Doria helped rout this attempt in the Battle of Preveza in 1538. Venice then surrendered to us, and we then gained ultimate power in the Mediterranean. After Ismail died and his son took over, I decided to take advantage of Iran during the periods of peace in Europe. I led 3 campaigns in northeastern Iran between 1534 and 1554. And although I was able to capture a few Safavid territories, I was unable to catch and defeat the Iranian army. The old trade route of meditation regained some of its former volume and was somewhat restored in the 16th century. From now on, my empire would face its most difficult times, its most turbulent times. In the year 1808, the anti-reform coalition, which overthrew the reform-minded sultan known as Salim III, was interrupted when the few surviving reformers aligned with the Ayans of Rumayla who supported them. Needless to say, the Ayans of Rumayla showed interest in these reformers because of their fear of possible threats to their own position, and led by the forces of Mustafa Pasha, were only able to recover Istanbul, but appointed Mahmud II as ruler, who then recommended policies of reforms that Salim previously initiated. The Ayans obviously only cared about protecting their own interests, so they went ahead and secured a covenant of union which guaranteed their rights against the central government, a sign of weakness if you ask me. And hence their victory was short-lived. The re-establishment of their conservative rule then re-emerges. By the end of 1808, the Ottoman Empire began weakening because of the authority of our central government was minimal for the empire. The control of North Africa had faded. Muhammad Ali was beginning the process of turning Egypt into an independent power. The Georgian Mamluk were only artificially under the rule of the Supreme Porte, which is the Ottoman government, and the independent local governors in Syria followed the same path shortly afterwards. European provinces by that time had their power fall in the hands of people such as Ali Pasha, claimed to be a local notable, and the Serbs demanded autonomy in 1807 to ally themselves with Russia. External threats to my empire were also ominous. The Ottomans went to war with Russia in an attempt to cover lost territory, which was followed by the invasion of many principalities by Russia and Britain, to name a few. But then obviously shortly afterwards, Russia gave them back through the Treaty of Bucharest. Mahmud II then came, and his internal reforms focused on the reconstruction of the army to preserve the empire from European powers and suppress the ambitions of the locals. While good in theory, he was not capable of executing such a task. What they call the auspicious incident took place in 1826 when the Sultan massacred the protesting Istanbul Janissaries. The new army, modernized to mimic European style, had immense loyalty to the Sultan. But the attempt to keep up with European powers led to the reform of the empire's political and economic institutions, such as higher education training of army doctors and so forth. From this, the system of minimum government was replaced by state centralized decisions. In 1838, a full-blown European-style ministries were created and new councils were established to assist in long-term planning. The only local ruler who succeeded in asserting his own authority against the Porte was Mahmud Ali of Egypt. Egyptian forces, aside from invading Syria, threatened Istanbul. So Mahmud in 1833 was unfortunately forced to seek Russian aid. In 1839, Mahmud attacked the Egyptians and once more the Ottomans were defeated. This gave Mahmud Ali the title of ruler of Egypt, and Britain helped us recover Syria. By the time Mahmud II died in 1839, the Ottoman Empire was facing pressure. But it needed to, and it was going to persevere. Threats increased, but we must not forget that this is the time when the empire was more consolidated and powerful than it had ever been at its height, or actually it comes as a close second. European pressures and Russia aligning with Britain aside, this was the time when we replaced the turban with the fez. The next ruler, Abdul Majid I, brought a series of Ottoman reforms known as Tanzimat reforms. You will hear many criticisms about the reforms, Western controversy saying our reforms were merely a desire to win European diplomatic support, and so on. Don't believe this. We wanted to expand on ideals of a great power that is inclusive and powerful. We promised equality of the Christians. In 1839, they say we asked the British for help to fight Muhammad Ali. Following after, in 1876, European pressures for reform were continuously mounting. This view of the Tanzimat was a misconception. Europeans were only concerned with the living conditions of Ottoman Christians, and so they ended up finding any elements of the Tanzimat that appeared to align with the absurd goal they claimed we had. For the Ottomans, the reforms were to preserve the Ottoman states. Although the Ottomans found it necessary to make some concessions to European powers and to their own non-Muslim subjects,